pregnant wife cheated on me. My wife, 30 female, and I, 28 male, have been married for 4.5 years and have a gorgeous 3-year-old daughter. We purchased a property last year, which came with a lot of worry since we were put through hell by the attorneys we worked with. Papers upon documents were necessary, information sought had previously been supplied, and we were ghosted by them until we remained online for hours waiting to talk with someone, each time telling us something different. It was a difficult period, but we eventually found a home that we both liked and that would be ideal for our child. We attempted to have a second kid a few months after moving here, but it simply didn't work out. My wife started to fear that we wouldn't be able to have another child since the previous one had come so quickly after just a month of trying. I was hesitant to have a second kid so soon after the stress of relocating, and I was also trying to find a better career at the time so that we could be more secure. When I told her this, she became quite angry, believing that if we didn't attempt now, we would never be able to conceive. I gave in after seeing how much it meant to her, and I did want a second kid, so we tried. Months passed, and she ultimately became pregnant. It was wonderful because she was so joyful, but I had a nagging fear that if I didn't obtain a better job soon, we'd struggle with 2 children. I shut myself away for a few months, taking online classes to attempt to get the skills required to transition into a new job route, which we had discussed and she appeared to agree with. We didn't drift away at this period since I only saw her for a few hours a night at supper and then went upstairs to work on the courses. We grew apart and didn't spend much time together. We still had a reasonable amount of for a married couple, at least once a week and sometimes more. Fast forward 3 months, and we have a conversation about how I believe we've grown apart a little, and that we're not the same as we used to be. Things had become a little robotic as I tried to learn and study as quickly as possible in order to secure a new career with the baby on the way. We decided that we needed to spend more time together since things had become stale between us. We spoke further after that, and she said how pleased she is at work with her colleagues. She appears to mention one person in particular more than anybody else in her tales. She transforms nearly instantly. Suddenly, she begins to do things she would not normally do. She is nearly always on her phone, takes showers every day right after work, her legs on a regular basis, and lavishes on makeup and moisturizer. I asked her about it at the time, and she said that since she was growing larger, she wanted to take better care of herself and feel better about herself. I purchased it. Isn't that correct? She is becoming concerned about her size, so I felt it was a good thing she was doing these simple things that helped her feel good about herself. Other minor things, too, gave me the impression that things were not as they seemed. Staying late after work and requesting that I go upstairs early at night to put our daughter to bed. Things like that, I didn't suspect anything and had complete faith in her. One day she asks if she may go out for the night to visit an old school acquaintance she hasn't seen in a long time. Sure, I responded, that's okay. It'd be excellent for her to catch up. It never occurred to me that she was having an affair with a person from work, or any place else for that matter. A week or 2 later, my mother-in-law pays a visit and tells me about an acquaintance who was going through a divorce. Her buddy discovered messages on her husband's phone indicating that he was having an affair. My mother-in-law and I spoke about how bad it had to be and how we couldn't imagine getting to the point where we felt the need to check our partner's phones. During this chat, I saw a flicker of dread and worry sweep across my wife's face for the shortest fraction of a second. Then it was gone in an instant and the talk resumed. That's when I began adding things up. I didn't think she'd done anything wrong, but there was something gnawing at the back of my mind. As I joined the dots, I got more anxious. I strolled into the bedroom after she'd gone to bed, when I'd typically be studying, and it was as if I'd caught her in the midst of something. She was in bed and had swiftly pulled the covers up to her chin as I walked in. I asked her if she was okay, had a little conversation about a few topics, then kissed her goodbye. My brain was now on high alert. I remembered her password from when we first met, so I entered into her social media sites on my computer in my study, and what I discovered was much worse than I could have anticipated. For the previous week, they had been transmitting videos of each other and chatting nasty. She had been doing it before going to bed, and I had been doing it after I had put our kid to bed. The talks had shown that they were having at work, and even in our home when I was working. I also discovered he was about 20 years her senior and has a wife and 2 children of his own. She had been doing things with him that she would never do with me. He gave her assignments every morning on what to dress, how to speak to him, and so on, and she loved it. She suggested they book a hotel away from him since she couldn't bear the idea of being apart from him and pretended to be meeting up with an old school buddy. The communications appear to imply that she was pushing things to the limit and planned around our schedule to squeeze in short wherever she could. Adrenaline flowed through my veins as I scribbled down all I could from those chats and slept close to my kid that night. I didn't sleep. Instead, I simply lay there thinking and sobbing. I didn't say anything when she went for work in the morning. It was difficult, but I didn't know what to say. She got all dressed up as joyful as can be as she left that morning, and it broke my heart. I intended to confront her when she returned home. My mother-in-law arrived to pick up our kids since she had been watching her while we were both at work, and I sobbed and told her everything. She was both sympathetic and dissatisfied. When my wife returned home, she realized she had been exposed. I yelled and demanded to know why. What was her motivation for doing this? Was the child mine? Is she in love with this other person? Is she determined to remain together? There are so many questions. She didn't say anything at first and refused to answer my queries. She was fading out and simply glanced at the floor, thinking. After a time of shouting, I requested that she could really speak to me since gazing at the floor was not what I needed right now. She claimed that things had just become between them the past week, which corresponded with the texts they had been exchanging that I had preserved. She said that she did not love this man and that it was a terrible error on her part. She pretended she wasn't thinking. It had nothing to do with me, yet she still cared about me. Nothing had gone wrong with me. It was just an escape from what had become a routine existence. She put it down to hormones. She said she hadn't been feeling well mentally for some time. I had no idea what to do. I went for a stroll and called my mother, who lives far away. She was compassionate and told me I needed to think things through carefully since we still had our daughter and an unborn kid to consider. I went back after venting to my mother. Despite everything, I remained in love with my wife. I wanted to be with him, to return to the way things were before we bought the home. I didn't tell anybody else anything in the hopes of perhaps saving our marriage and the kids. She remained to my mother-in-laws with our kid that night to give me some space, but it did nothing to alleviate my sorrow. I wished I could be with her. I phoned her and told her how much I missed her. She said the same thing. We had the following night, and it was as if nothing had occurred. I felt compelled to regain what had been stolen from me, so I took the initiative. We concluded that we did love one another and that, although it would take time, things would be difficult for a while. I was simply curious to see what would happen after the kid was delivered. I couldn't let go that lightly. I just asked her to be completely honest with me from now on. She returned to work and said that she had relocated her office away from him. She stated that they had chatted and that she had informed him that her family was the most important thing to her and that they couldn't go on like this. He asked her if it was indeed what she wanted, and she confirmed it to him. So we both went back to work, which was first dreadful. Every day, I'd return home in a different mood. Sometimes furious, sometimes I'm sobbing, and sometimes I'm okay. I began to attempt to study less and spend more time with her watching television, reading with her next to me, and getting up with her in the mornings to say goodbye rather than remaining asleep. It wasn't to make sure she wasn't still contacting him, but because I realized this was what I wanted. To return to normalcy, I began going to the gym, eating healthier, and taking better care of myself. We had good and horrible days excursions with our kid and playing with her, a little here and there. Her parents paid for all of us to go to a spa, which was lovely. After a few weeks, I was gradually but steadily coming to believe that this may work. I believe that something positive may arise from the circumstance. She said last week that she needed to go on a business trip on a day she doesn't ordinarily work. That I remarked was really unusual, and I would be concerned. Instead of her mother-in-law, she had requested a friend to look after our kid while we were both at work. This, too, was unique. I voiced my worries and asked her whether she planned to meet up with him again. She answered no and told me the time and place where she would be that day to put my mind at rest. Things were going quite well at this point, despite the fact that it was still very early, 3 weeks since D-Day. I went to work that day, terrified that I'd be worried sick. Surprisingly, I was unharmed. It was the first regular day I had had up to that point. I observed how much she expressed a desire for us to be together. She'd been so upset. I couldn't believe how much better I felt in such a short period of time. I trusted her. Then she contacted me during my lunch break, saying that things had been canceled at work and that she would be arriving home early. I inquired if she wanted to get lunch since she'd be in the same neighborhood as my workplace by then. No, she responded. She simply wanted to go home since her back was aching from the pregnancy, now 5 months in. I said, okay, and returned my attention to my task. When I asked her how her day had gone when she came home, she stated it had been dull and uneventful at work. We both went to bed, but I awoke in the middle of the night. I kept thinking about how strange it was that she had gone away that day and then returned so early. To put a halt to the craziness in my head, I examined her phone, which revealed that she had not been where she said she had gone. I addressed her when she awoke to see me squirming with anxiety. She denied seeing him again. I presented her with all of the proof, and she ultimately confessed it. She said that they had cleared the air and that they both agreed that they wanted to concentrate on their families and that nothing further would happen between them. She said that they had only discussed what had occurred in order to get closure. She hadn't talked to him at work in a long time, and she was eager to put the matter behind her. I claimed that she had put up an intricate falsehood, still lied after she knew I had figured it out, and had flatly refused to meet him that day. She said she went to his residence but did not enter. They went to a nearby cafe, had some coffee, and wandered around the park for an hour or two, simply chatting. I looked up a photo of a random bistro on my phone, which was nowhere near where she claimed she was. I inquired whether it was the one they had visited. Yes, she replied, it was the one. Yet another lie. When I informed her that the cafe was nowhere near where she claimed to be, she became angry and defensive. I wasn't paying attention, she said. Everything was a bit of a haze. It's not evidence that I'm lying. I'm being completely honest. Nothing ever happened. As a last test, I told her she had to prove it in the morning. I asked her whether she would text the man and say, I feel a lot better after yesterday. You? This way, if he responds with anything innocuous and consistent with what she told me, it may be real. If he suggests having again or responds with anything nasty, the game is over. She flatly refused. I attempted to grab her phone from the bedside table, threatening to send it if she didn't. She became enraged and shouted at me while grabbing her phone. She then started typing frantically on it. This was as good as a confession to me. She said she lied to me about where she was because she expected me to leave if I discovered she wanted to speak to him again. This happened yesterday, and I haven't slept in 36 hours. We decided that she would spend the night at her mother's place. I'm at a loss on what to do. There are more specifics, but I've been typing for quite some time. I can't believe she's pregnant with my kid. I'm 99.9% positive it's mine, and is still hanging around with this man. I'm a mental wreck.